Okay, welcome everyone. Last office hours of the year. Sing out on the chat line if you can't see me or can't hear me. Let me rearrange my screen so I can actually see if you're doing things on the chat line, which obviously would be useful. Thank you, Piet, for the ping. I always forget to turn chat on for everyone, but yeah, so fantastic. Thank you for joining me, especially, was it December 19th, very close to Christmas. So yeah, obviously I'm sure you got many things on your mind, the least of which is probably work or Oracle, etc. So the fact that you've joined me is very appreciative. Hopefully, tonight's very much about, as I always do it on my last session of the year, it's pretty casual, pretty relaxed. I asked people to send their questions in, and we had a few people. The vast majority of questions, as we'll see in a second, were just pretty much like not so technical, just more for discussion. So we'll get through to them. I have two topics that I didn't cover last month, which I should probably cover this month, but they won't take long at all. So without further ado, as I said, this is meant to be a nice interactive session, nice and casual, nice and chilled out. I should apologize. I cancelled last month's office hours like literally 2 days before it was scheduled because we ran one early November for the SQL CL project launch. And so I thought, everyone will know that that'll be the November office hours. And then I cancelled the one that we'd normally have like just a couple of days beforehand. And a few of you out there lost their minds. In came the email saying, I had set aside my time for this and you guys just cancelled it and, et cetera, et cetera. So I apologize. I misinterpreted how people would actually thought that they would see that the office hours was early. So I apologize. No need to flame me. Man, people get nasty when they miss their office hours, but I suppose that's a good thing. Anyway, let me share my screen and we'll get into it. As always, getting in touch is easy. You can just scan the QR code and you can get in touch with me. One thing I've added to my little link tree there is, of course, Blue Sky. If you're unfamiliar, a good chunk of the Oracle community seems to have migrated from Twitter, either off Twitter to Blue Sky, or they're running both in conjunction. But certainly, people will probably acknowledge that Twitter has become a little bit of a swamp of late, although things have improved a little bit since the American election has moved off and not so much political advertising coming on. But the reality is there's a lot of ads and junk on Twitter that still float around. So Blue Sky seems to be, at least at the moment, where a lot of the Oracle community has ended up. So if you want to have maybe a more interesting discussion, then Blue Sky is maybe the place to go. Already the chat line is going. What do we got? Okay, first question. We've got some questions coming in. Okay, let me cut and paste that and store it in our little thing. So these are things that we can get to as we go. Okay, as I always say, do not adjust your set. The slides look a bit strange because they're sitting there slightly off center. That's because we turn a video into this later on, but let's get stuck into it. Some bits and pieces. I did this last month, but I'll do it again because it just helps clarify things. Database 23 AI is almost out. And when I say almost, you can get the free version. You can download it there. You can run it on your own machine. You can run it on Database Cloud now as well. You can run it on Autonomous Cloud as well. And if you're running an Exadata machine or an ODA, then yes, you can run the same thing on your engineered systems on premise now, which of course leaves the question of what about just general on-premise? So I want you to note down this date, right? This is, you heard it here first. January 27th, 2025 has nothing to do with the on-premise release date, but it is my birthday. So note that down. You can send me your gifts and presents, or at least just flame me for missing an office hours. So unfortunately, I don't have any more information about the on-premise release date. That runs at the Larry and Safra levels. And suffice to say, I don't walk in those levels in the Oracle organization. I'm too busy doing office hours for community members like yourselves. So I don't have a release date. You may have seen the official Moz note literally got changed to be announced. So literally, as much as I do. I would love to say that I have some insider knowledge and I'm keeping it from you to inflate my own ego. But the reality is I don't. Basically, those decisions are made well above my pay grade. So as soon as I know anything, rest assured, your community and office hours people, you will be the very first to know. So what do we got? Judith's on there. Okay, the questions that keep coming. We have a lot of questions, which is good. Okay, what else have we got to talk about? Bits and pieces. There's a new 2024 end-of-year update for SQL Dev Next or SQL Developer VS Code. So the good thing is literally just starting up code should automatically install that update the extension. Stack of new stuff in there. So if you haven't given it a try by now, give it a go. It's got things like reports and a lot of the features from old SQL Developer. Speaking of old SQL Developer, that's also come out with an end-of-year update. These are mainly just bug fixes and maintenance changes. Obviously, our future is probably in the VS Code extension, but SQL Dev 24.3.1 is just out, literally, I think 2 days ago. So download that, get yourselves updated. And SQL CL came out as well, I think just about 3 or 4 weeks ago with our last update for the year. So any kind of tools you're using, go download the current versions. Also, Ords, I didn't put on there. Ords has just come out as well. I posted a video on Twitter the other day, literally from the time of actually doing a Google search, finding the Ords download zip file and installing it took me 90 seconds. So be aware that people think, oh, because I'm upgrading a product, it's this big hassle. For the database, that's a non-trivial thing, right? Although auto upgrade makes that a lot better. But for all the tools, literally they are unzip, done. So, it's often a case of just convincing your line management at work that if I want to roll out the next version of SQL Developer, no, I don't need 37 change approval meetings. Be aware that these things are now easy to roll out. What's coming up for me next year? Probably the first thing I'll be doing is in February, we have the multi-cloud event in India. Head over to aiug.org. So we got the basic cloud event there. We go through 4 cities. The good thing with that is because, as you know, Oracle's announced, we've got Oracle at Azure, Oracle at Google, and recently Oracle at AWS. It's much more of a big, happy family now. So we've got some Google people coming along to that event and some AWS people and Azure people because, the reality is, the cloud landscape has changed in the sense that no longer people seem to be mortal enemies. It's much more about actually, providing services to customers where they need them. For that, other than that, the year in review for me, as you can see from the pictures there, just had a fantastic year going to various user group events and other events all over the planet. Was very fortunate to get some travel approval, etc., by the powers that be in Oracle. But the key thing is, I can't stress enough, support your local user groups. I get the luxury of going to many of these events, but I think you can play your part as well. Just make sure you can get along to your local meetups. I think we really need to prosper and support those communities. That's how we all thrive as a customer base. So can't stress that enough. In 2025, get along to our local user group. If you've got a user group meeting and you need speakers, please reach out to me if you want me to come speak at the thing. I'll absolutely do my best there. I can't make promises, but I'd love to get along to any user group meetings that you have. Okay, submitted questions. So these are the things that came in. We've also had some on the chat line already, so we'll try to get to as many as we can. The way it works is I want to cover basically the top 3 first, which are basically things that have come in there. Then the rest of the stuff are questions that have come in. But as I said, I want to keep this one interactive. I'll bounce between ones that are on the slides, which are people that provided questions in advance. I want to take care of them, but also the questions you put on, those people who have taken the time to come along tonight. We'll do your questions and we'll try and bounce back and forth and cover as much as we can. So, as I said, we had a few things to get through, a couple things I didn't get to from last month's office hours, so I thought I'd cover them first. So, the first one, SQL plus arguments. Here's the question that came in. We need to run scripts from SQL Plus, which take parameters. However, we need those parameters to be optional, with default values to be used if they are not passed. We can't work out a way to do it. And it seems like a simple thing to do, and I thought I'd show you what the problem is and how to work around it. So let's do these. I want to get through this quickly because we want to get to a bit more interactive stuff. So here's the problem that comes in. Let's say I have a script called MyScript, and I just want to let people pass in an argument, and as I'm sure you know, the arguments are numbered 1 through n, etc. So that might be something of, I want to be able to pass in an argument and run select that argument from Joule. Very simple script. If I pass in an argument like hello, then life's good. It runs fine. It says hello. The problem is, what if I didn't? What if I didn't pass an argument? Well, then the script asks for it. And therein lies the problem. If I wanted to have a default, I don't want to actually pause and ask for this. I want to default to something. Now, you might be thinking, well, okay, I can easily work around that. What I'll do is I'll put an NVL around it. So I'll do NVL. If you don't pass in an argument, then I'll use the word default. That seems an obvious solution. The problem is, even with NVL, The way a substitution variable works in SQL Plus is it says, if I don't know it, I'm going to prompt you for it. So it still prompts you. So I didn't pass in a value for that parameter number 1, so I get prompted for it. Now, when I hit enter, yes, now I get the value of default, but I still got prompted. I've lost that thing of having an optional and automatic default. So the question is, how do we solve it? Well, in SQL Plus 23 AI, we have a new parameter called the argument parameter. And you can actually nominate. Argument 1 has a default of the word default in this case. So this pretty much solves this problem straight off the bat with SQL Plus 23 AI. So now if I provide something, you can see like the parameter was provided, it says yes, the value was provided. If I don't provide it, then it automatically picks up default. So we solved this problem in SQL Plus 23 AI. Now I've put here as a comment, you might be thinking, well, you just told me there's no on-premise 23 AI. But the key thing here is SQL Plus 23 AI comes with the 23 AI instant client, and that is available to use today for everyone, and you can use it against version 21, 19, etc. of your Oracle database. So it doesn't matter that the 23 on-prem version is not fully available for you. The instant client is and has been now for some months. So it's a good time to upgrade your SQL Plus client such that you can use these optional parameters using the argument clause. Now, if you can't do that, if that's a big deal, well, there's this little hacky workaround. What you can do is I call this MyScript 19, which means this will work under the SQL Plus 19 client and below. I define a column P1 new value 1, and then I do this select as P1 where 1 equals 0. It'll always return no rows. And by a little quirk of SQL Plus, what that means is if you happen to have something for amp1, you pass it on the command line, we will use it. Otherwise, because we have actually made a reference to this variable substitution variable 1 by doing this new value P1, even though this returned no rows, then we actually fall through and actually accept a default value. So now if I do provided, I get provided, and whereas before it would pause and wait, if I do default, it'll actually pick it up as default. So you can do it with this very strange bit of jiggery pokery. It can be done, but better off just upgrade to SQL Plus 23 AI, and it's much easier to use with the argument clause. So nice and simple. Let's get through this quickly. And this last one, right, this one won't take long at all. Here's the question that came in. Occasionally when we call our PL SQL procedures, we get an error because the parameters were not passed successfully. Has anyone ever heard of this before? A parameter not being passed successfully into a PL SQL procedure? It seems ridiculous. And it turns out that it's a bug. But I've put a big but here, and we'll explain why when we actually look at the demo. So let's do it just with a very simple inline PL SQL procedure inside an anonymous block. So here's my procedure called PC. It takes in 3 parameters, I, D1, and D2. And the test is very simple. If I is less than 0, or I does not equal one of the other 2, then we're going to raise an error. And I'm just going to call it like this. 3 values are all the same, which means it's always going to be positive, and these 2 things are always going to be true. So as we can tell, anything like this should always work fine, and if I run it, it does work fine, as you'd expect. There is no problems passing those parameters. Let's amp the stakes up a little bit. So rather than just having 6 calls, I've now got 26 calls, and if I put a pause in there, I've actually gone up to 100 calls. I run that, and that's fine as well. Let me set this one going now, and then we'll talk about it. Here's what happens. If you happen to pass in more than, I think it's 32,768 parameters in an anonymous block or some other procedure to call this other procedure, eventually one of those parameters gets garbled and corrupted. And so what happens is it ends up being passed in as a value of 0, and you can see that basically we no longer have a bug. We didn't manage to successfully pass that parameter into the inline procedure. Now, the reason I put yes, it's a bug, but I put but, if you are in the business of having 30,000+ procedure calls inside one procedure to some other procedure, whether it's inline or something else, I think it's time to rethink your approach. Something has gone hideously wrong there. Now, as far as I can work out, I was tinkering with this. It seems to be about 32K parameters in total. So in the example we had here, we're passing in 3 parameters. If you're passing in 10 parameters, then maybe 3,270 calls will cause you the problem. Whatever the case, I think something is wrong in your application design if you literally have that many explicit calls. I'm not saying we can't call the same routine 30,000 times. I'm saying you've got 30,000 individual calls coded inside your PL SQL code base. Something's wrong there. So I did log a bug. Yes, this bug is on the list of things to be fixed. But seriously, if you've got that much PL SQL calls inside one procedure, something's gone wrong. Literally either split it out into 2 procedures or 3, or maybe just have a little bit of a think about your design approach. Now, having said that, we're going to go on to the topics here that came in from people. So this optimizer one was someone who sent me a Twitter DM, but I'll come back to that one. Let's just go back to one of the ones that came in on the chat so we can reward people on the call as well tonight. So first one, where are we? That's right, Connor, this is the question that came in. What is the best way to manage table partitions to save disk space and, if possible, archive to external tables? What would be the impact on global indexes when doing this? Thanks. The easiest solution that I can think about is a thing called hybrid external tables, which came in 19C. I think one of the later versions are used of 19C, hybrid partitioned external tables. And as the name sort of suggests, the name hybrid says you can have a table which is partly, let's call it relational, or have normal partitions. You can insert, update, delete, and the like in them. Some of those partitions can also be based on external tables. What that means is that brings up that classic sort of, what do they call it? ILM, Information Lifecycle Management, where you can have a table that starts off as just normal segments, each segment being a partition, let's say this year's data, divided up into partitions of months. As you move into next year, you might want to take the oldest partition from last year and put it onto some cheap storage. It might be some object storage in Oracle Cloud or S3, or just a flat file on your file server somewhere, anything where it's out of the database to maybe save space, because often the storage in a database is more expensive than cheap storage elsewhere. You can unload that data. For example, you can unload it to a data pump format or a CSV format. You can unload that data to a flat file. And then what you can actually do is drop that, or do an exchange partition of the old segment data and exchange it into a external partition for that table. So now your table consists of 1 external partition and 12 active partitions. Next month, it'll have 2 external partitions and then 12 active partitions, and it continues rolling on. Now, what impact does that have on global indexes? Well, you need to index your table carefully. You can have a global index, but still define it as what we call a partial index. And what that means is the index no longer is built for certain partitions. And as you can imagine, it can't be built for the external partitions. So the optimizer will handle this in the sense that if you're doing a query and that you have a global index defined across the entire table, it will know that that index only can exist for the ones that are defined as partially active, which means the segments which are relational segments as opposed to external ones. So check out hybrid partitioned external tables, because it gives you that opportunity to do what we've always wanted to do, which is to slowly eke off data which is no longer important, still have it available for query, but not available for obviously for DML and not sitting inside our database. So check out that. If you're unhappy with putting things externally, then another option that people have used in the past before this feature came along was they simply put a table space on the cheapest storage they can and move old partitions into that table space and mark the table space read-only. Same thing applies. That no longer needs to be backed up. You've got one good backup of it, and you can do the same kind of process. But yeah, hybrid partitioned external tables is the way to go. We have a table that's heavily updated. I should say, if you're on the call, I paraphrased your question, so please don't be upset if I took some liberties. We have a table that's heavily updated daily, but the overall record count doesn't really change much. Because the optimizer detected has been changed a lot, stats are automatically gathered as part of the automatic optimizer task each night, leading to thousands of SQLs being reparsed over the 5-hour invalidation window. Should we lock the stats or fix the stats in some way? So to give you some answers to that, the first answer is no. The second answer is yes. And the third answer is maybe. So let's talk about those in turn. So the reason I would say no in terms of locking table stats, one of the reasons I don't like locking table stats is what tends to happen is it's one of those things that can be easily forgotten. So yes, your regular job is just doing effectively, not changing the structure of the data much, even though it's being updated heavily. But it's one of those things, if you lock the table stats, next time you do some sort of significant table maintenance in terms of a reorg, or you do a new application deployment and you've added some new columns, or you've changed the table structure considerably, database doesn't care. It says you lock the stats. I'm never touching those things again. So I think that's one of those things where it's so easy just to end up sort of forgetting about those kind of things. One of the things I would prefer to do is to do something like, for example, set the table preferences. You said the table's being updated very, very regularly, and a lot of it's being updated. Well, by default, as you probably know, 10% is the global default. If the database decides you've changed more than 10% of the rows, then it says that table needs to be flagged for fresh optimizer stats the next time they're gathered. But you can set that at a table by table level. So for that particular table, you could set the stale percentage to be something like 50 or 70 or even 90, something much, much larger, such that the optimizer doesn't go ahead and pick it up. In that way, you're not interfering with any of the sort of the bits and pieces of the standard optimizer practices. And should you do a significant reshuffle of that data, then you pick a stale percentage, hopefully that would then cross over that threshold and pick it up. What else did I note down about this? The other thing I wrote down is you mentioned that thousands of SQLs might be invalidated as a result of optimizer stats being picked up, and over the process of this typical 5-hour window in which invalidation occurs, then that obviously is a lot of SQLs. Yes, that's true, but we don't want to get stuck into what a friend of mine used to call compulsive tuning disorder. 5 hours is what? Let me do my maths now. What's that? That's about 18,000 seconds. That sound about right? 5 hours, I think it's about 18,000 seconds or in that vicinity. So even if you had 9,000 SQL statements invalidated due to the fresh optimizer stats over the course of that 5 hours, that still is a parse overhead of 1 every 2 seconds, which is nothing. Don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of reducing parsing on your system. But reparsing something once every 2 seconds, an SQL statement, is nothing in the overall scheme of things. The caveat to that would be is if you're running on, say, a data warehouse where sometimes you've got these 10, 12, 15 table joins and the parsing costs might be very, very expensive, then maybe that equation comes back into play again. Similarly, people will know me from previous videos where I've said I'm a fan of actually reducing that period from 5 hours down to something much shorter, because one thing I don't like is having an SQL statement reparsed in 4 hours' time, long after you've forgotten that you gathered optimizer stats and all of a sudden it starts performing in a different way. So I've recommended to people in the past to bring that period down such that if you do have problems, you notice them sooner rather than later, and you manage to pick up, make that a correlation between, that's probably because I've changed the stats. So as I said, we're sort of heading into that maybe territory now. There's lots of things to consider here. Other things I'd look at doing is, when it comes to these kind of things, is just in the general concept of optimizer stats, is one of the features I think is often not looked at by people is, instead of not locking stats, is using things like the set commands in DBMS stats. I'm a big fan of, reducing the amount of work the database has to do, and gathering stats can be expensive. If you've got a billion-row table, gathering stats on that table is a non-trivial task. And I've lost track of the number of customers I've visited where they have a billion-row table and they tell me, yep, every day we load in 100 million rows and we gather the stats and it takes too long. What do we do? And I often say, well, you know exactly how many rows you've loaded. So if you've gone from billion to 1.1 billion, why not just set the table preference, set the table stats. So, yep, I know the record count is now 1.1 billion. Often the data distribution might not have changed. The number of nulls might not have changed for certain columns which are defined as not null. The number of nulls has gone from 1 billion to 1.1 billion. For those tables that have a common distribution, if one of the columns is, say, states in the United States, you know that no matter how many rows you load, that distribution is going to be, 50 distinct values. Sometimes the distribution of the data, say, continuing that metaphor, the number of values for each state might change, and therefore it might warrant a calculation of stats. But these are things you might want to look at. To bring all those things together to hopefully bring an answer to this question, I think I put this on the slides as well. In my view, when it comes to optimizer stats, closeness to defaults wins every time. Now, to help explain what I mean by that, is I mentioned doing things like setting the stale percentage for a table, or setting table preferences, or, for example, using set table stats. All those things means your standard facilities, your optimizer tasks, etc., the automatic tasks, all run as they normally do. The closer you can be to default operation for the optimizer means that if you do have some sort of regression, some sort of problem, and you need to get in touch with support, you're not trying to explain to them the 37 deviations from default you took for your particular requirements. Because the first thing that support are probably going to ask you, and they are correct to do so, is say, can you reproduce your problem when you're running with the defaults? So the closer you can stay to the defaults, the better, in my opinion. Now, don't get me wrong, the optimizer is designed to be 99% correct for 99% of your queries. That's the aim. It can never be 100% correct because there's an infinite number of SQL statements you could run. You would need an infinite amount of stats stored in the data dictionary to have a perfect plan for every SQL statement. So our aim is be 99% of the time do not for 99% of your queries. That's the aim. So you might have to deviate from default, but do it as rarely as you can and as small as you can, such that you have a much better support experience should you ever need to. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, now let's go to another question that came in. What was after this one? This one, I'll come back to that one as well. Okay, so I've covered off, hopefully, external tables. Okay, here's one. How do you see the future of DBAs? I see a decline in projects for me as a freelancer. What areas are in high demand? Probably my best way, I think, of answering that. I don't need to share my screen, do I? Oh, I've got stuff on the chat as well. Yeah, we've got Q&As coming in. Oh, I'm out of control here. Okay, what was the question? Oh, how do I see the future of DBAs? I see a decline in project for me as a freelancer. Okay, so when it comes to a decline in the job of DBA, I would disagree, but I need to disagree with some justification and some caveats there. I think the DBA role has often been viewed as a role of expertise. You have a lot of knowledge in a narrow area. And I think that concept in the IT industry is dissipating. So I actually don't think it's a DBA issue. I think it's an expertise issue. There used to be the days where you could come along and, for example, if you're a developer and you knew Java, that's all you knew. Java, I could be a Java specialist and that's all I have to do, right? Or I could be a pure SQL specialist, or I could be a DBA, a specialist in managing the database. I think nowadays the world has changed a bit. And I often lament this because I think sometimes customers have problems because they don't have enough expertise in a certain area. But the way the world has changed is now what developers or what employers are looking for is people who have solid skills in multiple areas. So I don't think it's the DBA job in decline. I think it's the specialist jobs that are in decline. If you're a specialist in Java, a specialist in database design, a specialist in being a DBA, I think that doesn't, customers don't want that anymore, or they don't value that as highly as someone who can be a DBA and a bit of development. They can be a Java developer, but they know CSS, they know HTML, and they know a bit of other stuff. Hence the rise of things like DevOps, where we say, yep, I want my developer to know how to do deployments. I want them to understand infrastructure. I want them to understand cloud and networking, etc. I think we're seeing a broadening of skills that are being demanded. So in the main, I think that's good for us as IT professionals because it helps us, I think, broaden our knowledge base. But also, I think employers are maybe switched maybe too far in that direction. It's amazing how many times we have people inside Oracle, but also there are people out in the world as well who get called in saying, look, we have our DBAs, but they're all new. They don't have enough knowledge. We've got some particular Aura 600 problem. We need some specialist support. So I think people are starting to get caught out by the fact that they've gone for this generalist kind of model. Now, advice for you, if you're a DBA, I think, broadening those skills. And I think the current hype train of AI is a great opportunity there. There's not a lot of people at the moment there who would have vast knowledge in terms of the AI sort of landscape at the moment. Yes, we've all bounced around ChatGPT and the like and how to play and been Binged and Gemini'd and whatever these AIs are called nowadays. But in terms of being able to leverage those technologies for our existing databases, our existing customers, there's not a lot of knowledge out there at the moment because people are still finding their feet. So as a DBA, that would be a great place to look at broadening your skills. So you both become a generalist, which makes you more attractive in the marketplace, but also you're improving your own skill set as well. So hopefully that helps along those lines. Speaking of which, that brings me to the question which is back on the slides. So let's go to that one, because this is a question that came in along a similar line. All I hear is how vectors are the future of everything and AI is taking over the world, etc., etc. I don't even know what these terms. I don't even know what these terms of vectoring, basic, tensor even mean. Is there any AI for dummies content out there? Maybe there is, but I'm unaware of any. But I thought I would do a little bit of a sort of thing here. Now, what I thought I'd do is, let me see if I can bring up this. I'm not sure if this is going to work. So there we go. I plugged in my tablet today. Let's see how we go. So I wanted to help you out with vectors. So what is a vector? Very simple. It's an array of numbers. It sounds super cool, sounds so much better. And that's what we do in the IT industry. We never say, oh, by the way, vectors are just a list of numbers that you've had for 50 years, because that doesn't sound cool, does it? We have to say it's something new. Vectors, tensors, etc. All this stuff is just an array of numbers. So what's the magic? Why is just an array of numbers so good? Because my Commodore 64 had arrays, and I wouldn't say it's the equivalent of ChatGPT. So the thing that makes vectors special is you can take, for example, video. You can take documents. Who knows what the thing for audio is? I suppose I should draw a music. There we go. Anything you have, you can put through some sort of magic function and create a vector out of it. That's part of the magic here. Anyone mocking my writing skills will be kicked off the call, I might add. So this is the magic of vectors. Now, even this is not something you call particularly spectacular, because, for example, think about the monitor I'm broadcasting on. It already has this magic in terms of mapping something that's tangible to humans, for example, color, to numbers, RGB. We know that the color purple, for example, is a little bit of red, a little bit of green, a little bit of blue. So the ability to map something like color to a list of numbers is also something that's been around for decades. So why are vectors so special? The thing that makes vectors so special is the fact that the mapping system we use, the concept of taking some arbitrary data and putting it into vectors, goes through a big machine learning model, and that model grunts away for literally millions of dollars of GPU time. That's why these companies are buying hundreds of thousands of GPUs. They crank away and they're building nuclear reactors to do this compute work, cranking away such that the vectors come out, preserve the meaning of that data. You can think of it as like WinZip for human understanding. I could take a video, put it through this magic model, and out comes a list of vectors which preserves the meaning of that model. Now, the best way to describe that, let me use a very simple metaphor, which hopefully will help you describe why these vectors might be something like magic. So I'm going to do some very bad drawing here. I'll do my best. So I'm going to go back to the RGB model. Okay, so if I draw, for example, let's draw, there we go, 3 dimensions. That's hopefully 3 dimensions. There's my red, there's my green, and that's a G, and there's my blue. So let's draw some colors now. Let me take a color. So if I took something which is mainly red, then it might have a little bit of green, a little bit of blue, but mainly red. So if I plot it in 3 dimensions, it would look somewhere up there. So the vector for that in terms of for red might be 5% green, 5% blue, and 90% red. That's the top one up there. Now let's get another color. Let's get, say, a color like sort of a bluey green color. So now it's going to have not much red, so just a little bit up, a lot of green, and a good chunk of blue, so it might sit about there. So if I plot that one, it was not much red, lots of green, lots of blue, and we sort of get some color out here. And if I get another color which is closer but just a little bit more green in it, so it might come same distance up as red, a little bit more green, about the same amount of blue, and it sits there. So let's assume that was, I can't remember which one was which now, but let's say that's 60 green, 50 blue, and 5 red as well. So there's my very beautifully drawn three-dimensional diagram. So the thing that makes vectors spectacular, and it even applies in this simple example with RGB, is these two colors, as best as I could pick colors from the palette, are similar. One's a bluey green, one's a greeny blue, and on the diagram they're also close together. Now the red is totally different. Red looks very different from those two colors, and on the diagram it's far away. And this is the key thing with vectors, is the distance between these vectors represents the similarity in meaning of these things. So for this very simple RGB thing, we're saying that these two colors are relatively similar, and they're not very similar at all to this color. Now for RGB, that's trivial. But we can do this with the machine learning models for vectors to do it with anything. I can take, for example, a picture of my dog Bailey and the word greyhound, put it through an appropriate model, and the vectors that come out of those two models will be closely in distance to each other because they are both related to greyhounds. Now, in terms of distance, how do we measure these distance? Well, it's just the old high school geometry. If I was doing this in terms of high school, how would I do the distance between two things? Well, I would draw a triangle like that. Let's go back to black. I would draw a triangle like that, a right angled triangle, and you got the standard x squared, y squared, z squared, etc. That's why the terminology you'll often see in these vector diagrams is they say, oh yes, we worked out the Euclidean distance between two vectors. All that is this concept, the old Pythagoras rule, extended to many, many dimensions. This RGB is 3 dimensions. A typical vector might be 384, 512, or 1,000 dimensions. But these vectors, even though there are a lot more elements in them, obey the same principles. If two vectors, the Euclidean distance between them is small, then the meaning of the original data behind those vectors is similar. One might be two things about dogs. There might be a picture of a tree that's nothing like a dog, and therefore its vector will be a long way away in terms of distance. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully that helps answer the question. Oh, someone's posted in the chat. There's a nice AI training. I can recommend this. So everyone can see it in the chat, hopefully. There's a link there from the Oracle Learning site. Now, having done that, now I'm going to basically go back, and I'm not sure how I'm going to stop the share. Good, there we go. Now, truth be told, that was just me wanting to have some fun with a tablet, but hopefully we got some benefit out of that as well. So, answers the question on vectors. Okay, let's go back to questions that came in tonight. Okay, how do you manage to master the whole assortment of new features coming out pretty much every day, at least inside the database? That is a good question. One of the opportunities, I'm very fortunate, obviously, in the sense that that's part of it is that's my job to be able to do that. So I get the luxury of spending a good amount of time. However, for anyone that's out there thinking, oh, great, every time I look, 23ai's got a little update to the documentation. There's a new RU out. It's got some new features, etc. How do I keep up to date? For me, I would strongly recommend put aside a little bit of time each day, not to deep dive into the features. Anyone's been to one of my 23AI features talks, they're much more of a, what's a good term, like a degustation menu, just a little snippet at each thing. This isn't me saying that, oh, by the way, here's a quick look at this feature. You should go ahead and slap this into production. The objective of new features is simply to get exposure to them. Grab a little new feature, and there's plenty of content out there on the internet about it. And there's blog posts out there. There's my own YouTube video series. Lots of people have been putting out little snippets of 23AI features. But what that gives you is that little soundbite to get you have a look. Will it actually be useful for my customer? Give you a real example on the AI we just spoke about. A real example might be a lot of the AI functionality you see out there is very, I call it marketing driven, as in it's chat GPT based. Every vendor out there is saying, we've added chat to our application. You can talk to your database to get some data. You can talk to your Apex application to build an application. All those things look great, right? They look very impressive. But I think customers leaping aboard on that train, I think is some ways off, because we will have to learn an appropriate language to speak with precision to these AI engines in order to achieve our results. Me going, show me the financial results for last year will probably yield a different result to someone else going, I need the financial results for 2023. It's English language is imprecise, and therefore we'll have to come up with tools and techniques to improve the way we speak to these AI engines in order to get the results we want from, for example, our databases. I think what's far more useful is going to be, for example, the AI vector search, which is that concept I sort of described loosely, which is the ability to give search terms which aren't exact text matches for data in your database, but they'll still find those appropriate results. So coming up with use case solutions for customers, I think will drive your ability to find features. But rest assured, I think you don't want to get bogged down. It's very, as geeks, it's very attractive to grab each feature and say, I need to get to the absolute bottom of the absolute nitty-gritty of this feature. My point is, there's too many features for you to do that. Much better off to get a glancing overview of every single feature, and then as you come up with a genuine use case for a particular customer, or even just for your own plaything, pick one and okay, that's the one I'm going to deep dive into. But before you do that, make sure you've got a nice overview of all the features, because just knowing they're there is half the battle. I've lost track of the number of times in my own IT career that I have invented solutions only to find out that the solution actually exists core in the product. I'll give you a real life example. Way back in Oracle 8 days, for a customer, I wrote what I honestly consider was a beautiful queuing solution. Put a lot of time and effort into it. It worked very, very nicely. And then as I'm typing, I go, oh, what's this package called DBMS AQ? I wonder what AQ stands for. Oh, advanced queuing. Oracle had delivered advanced queuing in the time that I had built a queuing solution for this customer. And of course, my solution isn't supported. My solution won't necessarily be there on upgrade, et cetera, et cetera. So just knowing those features are there helps you maybe avoid a big chunk of work you may not have to do. Okay. So let's got that one. Oh, I got Q&As coming in all over the place. Okay, here's a quick one I can answer it. Are statistics on varchar 2 gathered only for the first 32 characters? That is my understanding. I don't think that has changed. I would have to check, but my understanding is that the first 32 characters are still the dominant characters when it comes to doing stats on varchar 2. So hopefully, Eugene, if that's wrong, I'll confirm it, but I'm pretty sure that hasn't changed. That's a quick one that we can just answer live. Okay. Let's go back to this one that came in from the slides so I can be fair. This is an easy one as well. Here's the question that came in. How do I get a job at Oracle? Can you give me a reference? So there's two things to talk about there. Number one is getting a job at Oracle is actually really easy in terms of finding what's out there and available because we advertise all our jobs in a single point called oracle.com/careers. You go to that page, it gives you a bit of boilerplate, etc., but it says click here to search for jobs in Oracle, and it goes to a website. I think it's called Talio. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but Talio is a sort of a job search engine, and all the Oracle jobs are available there, and you can search for keyword search, etc., etc. So finding what jobs are available that might suit your set of skills is a no-brainer. That's very, very easy, and anyone that wants to work for Oracle, I can highly recommend it. Great place to work. Then head over there and have a look, and maybe one day we'll be colleagues. The other question was, will you give me a reference? And that's one that often comes in. And my answer is always no. Now that might seem cruel, but let me explain why. And this is also advice for you if anyone ever asks you to give reference for people. So in my work, in my IT career, I've worked with some really, really smart people that have destroyed projects. I've worked with some really, really dumb people that have been critical to project successes. And I've worked with any permutation of those things above. And rest assured, this is not me jumping on the ego train here. I have been the person that I think has caused projects to fail. And I have also, I think, been the person that's caused projects to succeed. We all fall into those buckets because successful IT projects are a combination of skills, personalities, and how the team is organized. Sometimes you have the perfect set of skills to bring to a project, but you just don't gel well with the team. Maybe your personality doesn't match with them. Maybe your working timeframes doesn't work with them. Maybe the way that you would like to conduct the way you work at work is different to the way they do. There are so many things, invisible and tangible skills that are crucial to the success of a project. They might be, and so only a tiny percent of those things are skills. That's why even if I've basically, I'm aware of someone in terms of what they blog about, what they produce content on, maybe they speak at conferences, even if I have a really strong understanding of what they are like in terms of their Oracle skill set, if anyone asks me for a reference, I will say all I can speak about is their skill set. I will never give someone a blanket, yes, you should employ this person, etc. The dog's coming to say hello. Because you can't do that. Unless I've worked with someone on a project from commencement to completion, then that's the only way you can really know whether they've actually got what it takes to sit in the project that's being considered for them. So please don't be offended if I don't give you a reference, but I'm also advising anyone who is in the position that gets asked to give references to keep that in mind. Don't be the person that illegitimately gives someone a glowing recommendation or a bad recommendation, because you really can't comment on how they're going to work besides maybe their skill set unless you've worked on a project with them. So that's on that one. Hopefully that helps. Let's stop here and go back to what else we got. Where's my chat line? Okay, here's one. Okay, Connor, how would you achieve the predicate pushing in a view as described by Tony Hasler at this without using his approach that is almost a magic for me? Okay, well, I haven't brought up that site, so I have a lot of time for Tony. He's a smart guy, but I won't bring up the website here. What I will do is talk about something different in terms of when it comes to pushing predicates in views, we have a lot more options at our disposal nowadays. Back in the day, if you had a view and you wanted to push a predicate into it, your two options were you got down your knees and you prayed a bit because you were hoping the optimizer would be smart enough to push a predicate in, and the optimizer obviously has rules in terms of what it could do. Originally, it used to be your view could simply be based on a single table with no aggregates in it. And then this is way back in Oracle 7 days, we got better in terms of if you had a key preserved join, then you could push predicates in. And then we got better, things like if you had union alls, you could push predicates in. And so each version of the optimizer all the way through to 23 gets better and better at being able to grab predicates from outside the view and bring them inside the view and still guarantee the correctness of the operation. But in all those cases, there are still rules in place that are going to prohibit that. The most common one is if you've got an analytic function or a window function in there, it almost immediately is going to prohibit pushing predicates in because it would change the result of the window function. So in the past, the way we overcame that obstacle was typically with a context. You've probably seen the syscontext function. You can use syscontext to build your own custom context variables. Think of it as a list of key value Freudian slip, key value pairs, in the sense that for a given key, you can nominate a value, and then inside your view definition, you can have where column, etc., equals syscontext function to extract that value. Your query to the view then becomes a two-step process. Step one is set the value of the context variable and then query the view. And obviously for things like ad hoc query tools, that's sometimes not possible because you don't get access to set those variables before that. But from Oracle 19 onwards, you've got even more options. In fact, even from 18. You've got polymorphic table functions, which effectively lets you do parameterized views using a polymorphic table function concept. Now, they're a non-trivial piece of code to put together. What's probably even easier, and maybe might one day even lead to the obsolescence of polymorphic table functions, is SQL macros. SQL macros is probably the easiest way at the moment to pass a parameter into a view or effectively into a SQL statement that you define on the fly. So Tony's comments are all valid, I think, for historical versions of the Oracle database. For nowadays, anytime when the optimizer can't push a predicate in, the easiest way in my view would probably be to grab that view and define it as a SQL macro, because they literally take parameters, there's typical PL/SQL functions, and you can simply reference them inside the dynamic SQL you build. So if you go to Live SQL and search for SQL macro, you'll see plenty of examples where, parameterized views are literally almost a core component of the SQL macro function. And so it solves all those hassles. Okay, what have we got? More Q&A. What else we got here? Okay, so I think I've answered that one. Okay, I think, what time we got? 9:54. Oh, I've got 5 minutes left. What have I got left on the slides? Oh, yes, this is a good one to talk about as to finish off. Okay, the question that came in was, Now, I think this is the question that came in because this question was sent to me in Croatian. I didn't know it was in Croatian until I grabbed it into Google Translate. And so hopefully this is actually the question, but I think it was. I saw the Oracle ACE booth when I attended the HR OUG conference. What is the ACE? I assume what is an Oracle ACE? So let me stop my share. I don't need this anymore. As I said, interactive session today. Oracle ACE is a recognition program devised almost 20 years ago by Oracle. Originally it was by Oracle Marketing. Now it's run by the Oracle Database Group, but we don't just limit ourselves to database. We have ACEs who are Java programmers, Fusion middleware ACEs, ERP ACEs, etc., etc. The ACE program is a recognition program of people, much like yourselves in the community, that are eager to build the community's knowledge of Oracle technology. Now, that might be through blogging, it might be through speaking at conferences, it might be through writing a book, it might just be being a member of your local user group and helping organize things. We have different levels of Oracle ACEs and different ways that these people are recognized. But Oracle wanted to have some mechanism where we say, look, we understand that most of you people have normal 9 to 5 or daily jobs, but that sometimes means you do a little bit extra. Sometimes you do your jobs, but also you think the things I've learned at my job, I want to share with others. Through blogs, through office hours, through conferences, etc. Anything that you do, which is, for lack of a better term, going above and beyond what you would consider as a normal IT professional, which helps others in the Oracle community. And that's the key thing. Anything which you do which helps others in the Oracle community prosper, I think is worth of recognition. And it's often the thing that we never get paid for. We don't get paid for that. And so the Oracle ACE program was designed to do that. And we have various levels. At the highest level, we have a thing called an ACE director, which is someone who is just absolutely recognized throughout the global community as being an expert in their field. Now, that might be through the volume of content, the quality of the content, and also their interactions with people inside Oracle. We have Oracle product managers who might work almost on a one-to-one basis with some of these ACE directors in terms of making the products better. The ACE directors are like a link to the outside world in terms of getting feedback on these particular products. Underneath that is an ACE Pro, someone who contributes regularly in terms of helping the community via content, via conferences, via a whole range of means, which get them what we call an ACE Pro. And then at the entry level, we have a thing called the ACE Associate, someone who has done, beginning their journey in terms of being an active community member. They may have done a few blog posts, a few bits and pieces here and there. They're active and they're still, they're working their way through to becoming a fully fledged ACE because they're working their way through to being a greater contributor to the Oracle community out there. Exciting news for the ACE program is in 2025, there will be effectively even more opportunities for people who have never been involved in contributing to the Oracle community simply because they might be fresh out of university, they might be a student, they might be just new to Oracle, they might just be new to the concept of what can I do that would actually reach outside my normal working sphere. We're looking at introducing ways for people who have never thought about doing these kind of things, and yet we'll give them opportunities to also be involved in the ACE program in some way, such that we can sort of foster this concept of the more we grow our community, the more we help each other in the community, the more we all prosper. And I think that's probably an excellent way maybe to wrap things up for this office hours. Now, as is tradition, for the last office hours, I get the champagne bottle out. Take this off. Now, someone told me the other day that any bottle like this that's corked in the world has the same number of twists. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you have a champagne bottle nearby this Christmas, tell me if yours also has 6 wires, because I'm told that that's what it's the case all over the world. So we always open it in front of the microphone, obviously, and hey, there we go. So as always, I pour myself a glass of champagne for the last office hours of the year. Hopefully not spill it. And the reason I pour it is because I want to toast you, the Oracle community. Thank you so much for your support all during the year. Hope you've enjoyed our sessions. Please reach out to me in any way you like whenever you want to talk about technology. That's what I'm here to do. If you ever have problems with the Oracle database, please reach out. We just want to help you succeed and prosper with the Oracle database. Thank you always for giving up so much of your time. Hope you get some value out of these. Thank you for your interaction tonight and throughout the year. And hopefully, please, I'll see you at a user group meeting somewhere in 2025. So cheers to all of you. Have a very safe and happy holiday season. Thanks, everyone.